came easily. We had tried restrictions on playgrounds and on basketball courts, but we were still seeing too much crowding. We had reports from our rangers, we had reports from citizens in our community, and Google Analytics had demonstrated a great increase in traffic to our county parks following the stay-at-home orders initially. So we had to take aggressive measures to help contain the virus in our community. We are reopening most of our parks today with restrictions and signage, as you can see, to help remind people of social distancing and what that means. And I'm convinced now that social distancing is understood by our community. It's taken, people take it much more seriously, and everyone understands the impact it has had so far to slow the virus in our community, and the importance of maintaining it in order to get our region moving again. We know that our parks is a relief valve for our community. Our kids can only watch so much Netflix. Our adults can only do so much homeschooling and parenting and education, and only so many Zoom videos for their work product. But we want to thank our residents for staying diligent. We understand what we need to do to continue in the direction to contain the spread of the virus in our community, and social distancing is a part of that. In the same conversation I had with our staff about closing the parks, we also immediately started to talk about what reopening would look like. And I asked them to come up with a plan to reopen our parks with restrictions in a limited way, with extra signage to reinforce social distancing, and that's what we're doing here today. On our website here later on this morning, you'll be able to find the list of parks that are open, and the trails that are open, and the parks that will remain closed. And that will be on stlcorona.com and also on the county parks website. In a general sense, we will open the larger parks with trails, and the smaller parks for now, which are predominantly playground equipment, will remain closed. And so this will be a stepwise opening, again emphasizing social distancing and avoiding crowds. Other features, park features that will remain closed include restrooms, dog parks, sporting courts, soccer fields, racquetball courts, and indoor facilities, things like that. So about 30 of our parks will open, about 20 will remain closed. Lone Elk Park will be drive-through only. Any sort of scheduled event at a park, any sort of featured event, will be canceled through May 15th. So there's 4 things we're asking of everyone. If you're sick, stay home. If you're in our parks, keep moving, keep walking, ride your bike, run, stay 6 feet apart of everyone else, unless it's someone you live with. If you come to a park and a park's crowded, consider coming back later or visiting a different park. We must avoid crowds at parks. Crowded parks will become closed parks. Use common sense and avoid congestion on our trails. In our parks, we will have 31 one-way loops to help people comply with social distancing. Please follow the one-way loop signs on our trails whenever you see them. So before I introduce some other folks, I want to make a couple of announcements. I want to first recognize that a few weeks ago I mentioned that 3 of our park rangers had tested positive for COVID-19. I want to announce that all 3 of them have recovered and that are doing well, and they are back to work. One of those rangers, Rich Banahan, is here with us today. I want to recognize Rich. And Rich, you want to say something? Come on up.
I just want to say it's great to be back. It's great that the parks are opening up, and for everybody just to remember to maintain social distance. It's important. We have a resolve, and we are going to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I also want to recognize St. Louis County Councilwoman Kelly Dunaway. Her district is, in part includes Creve Coeur Park. She represents this area. Kelly, would you like to say something?
Thank you so much, Dr. Page. Thanks so much for all of you and to the community for supporting us while we get through this time. We've heard from so many constituents who want the parks reopened, who want the parks to remain closed, and we feel that this is an excellent compromise to give our community a chance to get back out there, practice social distancing, and keep our community safe so that we can continue to reopen further parts of the parks and our community as time goes on. So thank you all so much for sticking with us, for staying strong with us, and welcome back to the parks.
Okay, I would like to recognize our Parks Director, Tom Ott. Tom, would you like to make a comment, and then we can take questions?
Good morning. I want to say thank you to Dr. County Executive Page for getting our parks reopened this morning. And I just want to remind people to keep social distance in mind. We've got plenty of signs, banners, and message boards out there. Our park rangers will also be out there in the parks watching, and we've got park ambassadors in the park to greet people at our large major parks. So again, welcome back to St. Louis County Parks. Thank you.
Okay, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Can you talk about some of the smaller businesses? I mean, what are we seeing in the foreseeable future? Hair salons, barber shops, mom and pop stores, that sort of thing?
So we will plan on a graduated reopening similar to what you're seeing around the country with social distance and retail and that sort of thing. I imagine our plan will look similar to others that you see around the country, but emphasizing social distancing moving forward. The question is timing, and we're watching the hospitalization and ICU curve very closely. We're watching the testing very closely. The challenge we have is we still don't have adequate testing in our country or in our community, and testing is one of the ways we measure progress. And when we see the test results start to fall, that doesn't necessarily mean that the viral load is falling because we still have limited access to tests. But what we can watch is hospitalizations, and it appears that those are plateauing over the weekend. And as that curve starts to fall, then we'll start to talk about when we could begin relaxing our safety orders on social distancing.
Everyone wants a ballpark figure or dates. Is that possible?
Everyone wants a ballpark figure. You are right.
And is that possible at all right now?
I can only say what I've said before, that we'll know more in a week or so, and that the variables that we need to make an educated and thoughtful and responsible decision about relaxing our safety orders, those variables haven't been established yet. What is the availability of testing in our community? Are the curves continuing to drop? You can't necessarily tell when you're at the top of a peak. When you're standing on it, you have to start to get to the other side and look back at it, and then you know you're there. But we all are very sensitive to the devastating economic impact that this virus has had on our community, and the tough choice we had to make between saving lives and saving livelihoods. St. Louis County and the St. Louis region is the hardest hit in Missouri. We have 40% of the cases in Missouri are in St. Louis County. 60% of the cases in Missouri are in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. And so we have a much different problem than the rest of the state. I spoke to the governor this morning. He understands what we're doing. He encouraged us to make our decisions here locally and said he would support our decisions. And we have a very good relationship with the State Department of Public Health, and we'll continue to work together to move us forward.
As you know, County Executive, the city did not end up closing their park. So my question for you is, how effective do you think this particular park closure decision was if people were just going from county parks to city parks or potentially municipal parks that didn't shut down?
Well, it's always difficult to measure the impact of a measure, but I do believe that we were extraordinarily crowded in our park. You know, Creve Coeur Park is one of the most popular parks in the region. We saw that crowding. We saw it in reports. We heard it from our residents, and we needed to take some time to reboot, to implement signage, to educate our residents, and we did not have the bandwidth or the capacity to do that quickly because our park rangers, some of them were sick, some of them were redistributed to other public safety needs. So it took us some time to get organized. I do believe that crowding matters. Crowding matters inside or outside. Everyone knows that. Our state parks in the region closed, and there I would expect to see them reopening soon too. and to take some of the pressures off the county parks and let people get out and stretch a little bit. You know, these are all tough decisions. None of these decisions are easy. None of them are clear. We're dealing with a novel coronavirus. That means it's new. That means we don't understand it completely. Scientists don't understand it. Doctors don't completely understand it. We learn something new about it every day. In the past month, we've learned that symptoms that people can have are different than what we first thought, and we'll continue to learn more about it. But I think the initial closing was necessary. It took us a couple of weeks to get our message together, to get our community used to and to be respectful of the importance of social distancing and what's at stake moving forward with social distancing.
Are you at all concerned about mixed messaging, given when the governor was talking about reopening the state, he did point to the numbers here in St. Louis area that we are so much higher, and at least the messaging yesterday from the city was that we're not going to be seeing those same measures because we simply can't. But reopening the parks, it kind of might muddy that water. Are you concerned at all about that?
Messaging is always difficult in an emergency, especially one like this. The parks are somewhere in the middle. It is outdoors. They can be accessed with social distancing. We're allowing access of some of our parks with these measures. We think it's an in-between measure, and it's the right thing to do now.
How did you decide which parks were going to be open, which parks were going to stay closed?
We're basically focused on social distancing. Social distancing is the most effective way to treat this virus. We don't have a good medical treatment plan. There's no pill that works. There's no vaccine. This is all about social distancing. We believe that on our trails and in our larger parks that social distancing can be accomplished if we have buy-in from our community. That's what we've seen around the country. That's what we've learned.
So just the bigger the park, the more likely that
Right.
it could stay open?
That's right. Larger parks will be open. We want people to keep moving. We want people to stay apart, 6 feet apart unless you're with someone who you live with. And the smaller parks that are largely playgrounds and equipment and basketball courts, which do not work well with social distancing, those are going to be closed at least for the near future.
A question on something that's going to happen in a few hours. The county council is likely going to pass 2 bills. One, the $7 million allocation. The second one being the setup of the CARES Fund account. As I'm sure that you've heard, some Republicans on the council, or all the Republicans on the council, do not like the second bill because they feel like it cedes too much power to the executive branch.
Right.
I want you to respond to that because I'm sure we're going to hear from that today. And what do you say to people that don't like the way this has been?
Well, I think the whole concept of the coronavirus, the public health response, unfortunately has fallen along party lines. Some of that is partisan and philosophical. Some of it is just supporting the president's position. But in general, unfortunately, the response to this virus and whether or not individuals believe that it's an emergency, whether or not they believe it's urgent, whether or not they believe that stay-at-home orders are important or how long they should last, does have a partisan divide across the board. And what you see at the council is a question of whether or not this is an urgent or emergent situation. I have always and will continue to look to the council members for advice and counsel when making big decisions in county government. But from an operational standpoint, moving these funds into a place where they can be spent urgently when needed without repeated trips back for appropriations is the right way to do it. It's the way emergencies are usually handled, and it's the way grants are usually handled. We've processed $270 million worth of grants in the past 5 years, and they've always moved through the council with review by the granting authority. And if you don't meet those granting authority requirements, then you have to repay the grants. In this case, the federal government has specific requirements. The Inspector General will be watching to make sure it's all COVID-19 related. And we've taken an extraordinary measure of opening up a portal so the public and anyone can follow along and see what bills we've obligated to pay and what bills have been paid.
And just to follow up, if, for example, the council had to approve every allocation of that money, you feel like it would delay the money being spent in an emergency? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding.
Well, absolutely. I think that's a big part of the discussion. And then there's a question of what's their role and responsibility going to be moving forward. And my brand and reputation, and when I was chair of the council, was I've always looked to the other council members for their involvement. They'll be involved in this as much as they want to be. The challenge is that, you know, we're in a partisan election cycle, and there's always going to be noise around anything that government does. And, you know, I would be surprised if every decision we made, no matter what it is, there will be some criticism and some, you know, disparagement of it. That's what happens in politics, and that's what happens in an election year. I think our county residents expect us to come together in an emergency and govern and take care of people in a public health crisis and get our economy open again. Any questions?
What would you say to people who have criticized the decision about the parks? You said that, yeah, things are partisan and this was a purely political decision, even though it might not have made sense to them.
I think you're going to hear a lot of name calling in an election year, and people will make up their own decisions. My job every day is to look out for the health and welfare of people in St. Louis County. I'll continue to do that and continue to try and make good decisions that are based on saving people's lives and addressing the humanitarian response here and restoring the economy. And everyone can take those criticisms and evaluate them how they want to evaluate them. Now, we're going to move forward. We're going to make decisions. I'm happy to work with people who have criticized me. Sometimes we agree, and when we agree, we'll work together. Sometimes behind those criticisms, there's a good idea, and we need to find that, even though it comes in a package of disparagement. That's what happens in politics. That's especially what happens in an election year, especially what happens in a hyper-partisan environment that surrounds the response to this pandemic. It's really become too partisan.
And what if, have you thought ahead, what if people do come in and start crowding the parks and you're not seeing social distancing? How are you guys going to react to that?
We will have to restrict access if we see crowding again. We really depend on people to keep their distance from each other, to respect those 6 feet, to not crowd, not congregate. We will have ambassadors here to remind them gently we are not interested in a confrontation, but a crowded park will be a closed park. We cannot have people crowding. We have to take these social distancing measures seriously. That's what allows us to reopen our economy, and it's very important that we start talking about that over the next couple of weeks.
As far as closing those, I'm assuming that would be on an individual basis. As to, yes, this park, they're not social distancing, it's not closed, but all the others would remain open.
You know, we'll always try and focus on problems as narrowly as possible. Absolutely.
I know you said this, but what is the exact date the parks are opening back up?
Right now.
Right now.
This morning. Gates were open this morning. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep. I'll see you next time.